Your bad habit is not just a habit, it's not just like something that you do automatically, it's also that, but it's not just that, it's actually serving as an emotional coping mechanism. Willpower, in my experience and perspective, doesn't really exist. It's just a conscious part of you wanting to do things against other conscious and unconscious parts of you, and very rarely will that part be strong enough to overcome the others. What if, instead of needing to run away from that feeling, to avoid that feeling, to cope with that feeling, even with a healthy coping mechanism, what if instead of that, it was actually safe for you to feel that feeling? Welcome back to Talk the Walk, where we explore how to walk your journey of healing, growth, and transformation with more success, ease, and joy. Welcome, this is Dr. Philippe Rocha here. Today I want to talk with you about something that is probably one of the most common questions that people ask me, and also probably one of the biggest struggles that people have in their lives, and that is how to quit a bad habit. Any bad habit that you can think of, from those related to your health and fitness, like smoking or vaping, like drinking, like a bad sleep schedule, too much caffeine, lack of exercise, overeating or binge eating, to those more related to like time wasting, often related to digital use, like doom scrolling on social media, like phone addiction, constant notifications, constantly checking your phone, maybe checking your phone first thing in the morning, maybe endless video streaming, binge watching Netflix, or some gaming addiction, for example. To those mental and emotional bad habits like negative self-talk, self-criticism, procrastination, overthinking, catastrophizing, or assuming worst-case scenarios every time. To social bad habits like people-pleasing, approval-seeking, or seeking external validation, over-apologizing, over-explaining, gossiping, and just the general overall toxic relationship patterns. So typically having toxic relationships after toxic relationships can also be kind of a habit. And even financial bad habits such as impulse buying. So all of these are what we would typically call bad habits. And do you have some? Probably, right? We all have something that we call bad habits, and we often struggle to be able to change them. We really want to change them. We see how they might be hurting us and what we care about, maybe our relationships, our productivity, our health and well-being. So we really want to change them, but we cannot. And that can be very frustrating. And we can enter into this shame cycle where we feel shame about it, and then we'll do it even more. I'll talk about this later today. And we can just go down a downward spiral. So that's not good. And we all deserve a beautiful life where we are living at our best and thriving at our potential. So this video today is to help you understand what are bad habits, how they are formed, and how you can let them go for once. So before we go there, we need to talk briefly about the most common ways that people try to quit a bad habit and often fail. And so the first one that comes to mind is, of course, through the use of willpower alone or motivation alone. And if you've been following my videos for some time, you already know that that's not going to work, because willpower, in my experience and perspective, doesn't really exist. It's just a conscious part of you wanting to do things against other conscious and unconscious parts of you. And very rarely will that part be strong enough to overcome the others. And sometimes it can do that in the short term, but in the long term, probably not. So willpower usually doesn't work. It burns out. And even when it seems to work, it doesn't seem to last. Because what it really just is you your conscious part that you call willpower trying to win over all the other intentions and desires and forces in your mind, both conscious and unconscious. So it's probably not going to work. And even if it works, you don't want it to work that way, because what's happening is you're like creating inner conflict and you're making your inner world about dominance, not about integration and wholeness. You're making like, okay, the willpower wins, willpower versus emotions, willpower versus the unconscious mind. You're making your inner world a fight, and that's not going to lead to a harmonious, beautiful, thriving life experience. So willpower alone is not recommended. And if you've tried it, you know already. Another way to do that people often try, is the cold turkey method, which is when you suddenly decide, okay, I'm going to stop this now, forever, no more. And from one moment to the other, you just don't do that ever again. This approach only works in very specific situations where there's a very strong emotional component to the quitting moment, where it's really just so powerful, like a very strong fear, for example, related to your health. You have a very big health scare. Or maybe I know people who had a child and they really wanted to provide a better health to their child. So it was very emotional. And that emotional is so strong that it wins over everything else. But this method is not reliable. Most times it will not work. Even when it works, it can lead to relapse. And again, it does not lead to growth and wholeness. So just quitting like that, okay, I'm not doing it anymore. It can work rarely for some rare people, and it's not the best way to do it. And they're going to learn today the best way to do it. Another way that people do it is through like resolutions or deadlines, like New Year's resolutions, or setting a deadline. And when this happens, I will do it. Or when that date comes, it's when I will start. And while that can provide some momentum in that specific date, we all know that after some time, the old patterns come back, because it was just like because of the date, and then we come back to the same thing after some time. These resolutions and deadlines, sometimes they can, very rarely, sometimes it can work when the bad habit doesn't have an emotional component to it, which is something that I will talk about later today. And that's very rare again. So that alone is not helping. There are other methods that people try, and we'll not discuss them all here today, but people also try rewarding themselves for not doing it and punishing themselves when they do it, which is really very not holistic way of doing it. You're basically treating yourself like an experiment animal, and you're not really going deep into the root cause of the problem and becoming whole and healing yourself. Let's go into understanding your bad habits and how to transform them. So the first thing that you have to understand is a bad habit usually has two parts to it. It has the habit part to it, what makes it a habit, but then it has, underlying that, it has an emotional part to that. And it's understanding this emotional part that will make all the difference for you to be able to really let go of that bad habit for good. So let's start by understanding the habit part. What is a habit? A habit, typically described, is an automatic pattern that operates outside of your conscious awareness. Habits are usually stored, if you talk about in neuroscience terms, in the basal ganglia, which are typically operating outside of conscious awareness. And so habits usually operate outside of conscious awareness. They're like automatic patterns happening that you are not even aware that you are choosing to do them. It's like something happens and you're doing that habit automatically. And that's also what makes it so hard to change them as well. So the way that they usually function is the following. There are like 3 steps to a habit. And the first one is the cue or the trigger. And this is something that happens in your environment, some cue, some trigger, some situation, some pattern that triggers the habit. So when that happens, when that cue appears, it triggers the pattern, or it triggers the habit or the behavior. Okay? So the cue might be like a social situation or a break from work. And that automatically triggers the behavior, which can be, for example, smoking. Okay? So that's the second step, the behavior or the routine, which is the thing that you actually do. It can be the smoking, the eating, the doom scrolling, and it's triggered automatically by that situation. So you are home with nothing to do, and automatically you go to doom scroll, or you have to do a report for work or school, and automatically you go watch a Netflix series. That's the trigger and behavior, trigger and response, right? Cue and routine. Those are the two steps of how it functions automatically. And then there's the third step, which is very important. It's crucial for the habit, which is the reinforcement or the reward reinforcement step, which is, okay, it feels good to do that. You do that, or even just by doing that, you are reinforcing the patterns in your mind, in your brain that create that habit. So just by doing it again, especially if you have a sense of dopamine when you do that, right? When you have that dopamine hit when you do that, it rewards the habit, it rewards that pattern and makes it stronger and more likely to happen again. And that's how habits are formed. So if this is how it works, if this is how it operates, how can you transform a habit? And of course, you're starting to see here that the key is awareness. So if the problem is that habits operate outside of your conscious awareness, so you don't have a choice, you're just doing them automatically, you want to build awareness. You want to start building awareness of the cues, the triggers that bring that habit up, and then bringing awareness of when you're doing that, and also awareness of how you reward yourself when you do that or not. And so once you build that awareness, you can build that awareness by practicing, by noting down what happened when you did that habit, who was there, what was happening, what was the situation, what were you feeling, thinking in that moment. Then once you do that, the way that people usually work is, okay, so I'm going to practice consciously when that cue or trigger happens, I'm going to practice not doing that habit and maybe doing something else. So that's where people often try to replace the bad habit with something healthier, something that's not bad for them. And this can be done with what I was talking about earlier, which is the if-then training, where you practice to yourself, if this happens, then I will do that. So for example, if I feel the urge to smoke, then I will drink some water and go for a walk. So you choose a better habit when you have that urge. And that's something that you train. And with practice, you will be able to replace the old one with a new one. Again, I'm not going to go deep into this because this is not what I want to teach you today. I'm just talking about the habit part of the bad habit. And most of them are not just habits. They have the emotional component. And that's why right now you're probably thinking that this will not work for you, because it will not. Because most likely your habit is not just the habit component, it's also the emotional component. But still, I just want to go over this quickly so you have the entire framework. So you have also this part. And so what people do that is they practice that and they create systems in their lives that make it, this is key, make it easier to do the new behavior that you want to do and make it harder to do the previous behavior, the one that you don't want to do. Okay. So also not only doing this in inner practice, but also changing your environment around you to make it much easier, more likely, more natural, more enjoyable to do the thing that you want to do, and harder or even impossible to do the thing that you don't want to do. And there are apps for that. There are techniques. There are ways to change your environment so you don't do the behavior that you typically do. Okay. And another thing, finally, that people often do here is tracking. So make sure that you're tracking your habits, because just the act of tracking it makes you much more likely to not do it. So again, these are the best strategies to change a bad habit when it's just the habit part. But again, like 95% 5% of what people call bad habits are just the habit part. Most of them have the emotional component. And so we need to talk about the emotional component because that's really where things get tough. Because think about it. When people say, how long does it take to change a bad habit and form a new habit? Using the techniques that we're talking about, how long would it take? Some people say 21 days. Some people say 90 days of consistent practice. But here's the thing. How long did it take you to form a habit out of eating pizza or ice cream or chocolate when you first tried it? Did it take 21 days of eating pizza or ice cream or 90 days of that? Probably not, right? The first moment you tried it, the habit was formed. And why is that? Because there was emotion in it. There was that emotional component that made it instantly like that. And this is also the power of us using emotion here. Because when there is emotion, when you know how to get there properly and associate emotion properly to the process, you can almost instantly transform a bad habit. Okay, so let's talk about the emotional component of bad habits. And this is critical. This is where we really get to the good stuff here. So what is the emotional component? Emotional component means that your bad habit is not just a habit. It's not just like something that you do automatically. It's also that, but it's not just that. It's actually serving as an emotional coping mechanism. So your bad habit is for you an emotional coping mechanism. What does this mean? It means that it helps you when you're feeling dysregulated or feeling some emotion or feeling that is very hard for you to feel. It helps you regulate and not feel that feeling. That's what an emotional coping mechanism is. And so that shows the problem that if you remove that coping mechanism, then it leaves you without a coping mechanism. And that's very scary for you and leaves you without anything to hold on to if you remove that habit. And so that's why there is such a higher resistance to changing the bad habit or to stopping it. It's why it's much harder to quit. It's so much harder to quit because there's just this very strong resistance to letting go of that bad habit, because you know deep inside of you, even if unconsciously, that if you stop doing that, then you'll have no coping mechanism to deal with whatever stressful situation or emotion it is helping you deal with. And even if you manage to stop that behavior, to quit that habit somehow, it's still very likely that it will come back, that you will relapse, because for some time, maybe you'll be able to tolerate the stress and the difficult emotion, but after some time it will be too much and you'll go just right back to the same pattern, and even maybe worse, because now you have accumulated too much of that stress. So you need to go deeper and stronger into it. So if you have had that experience, this may have been why. So let's go into the functioning. How does an emotional bad habit function? It's still the same 3 steps, but there's a key difference in each of those 3 steps. So the difference is that the cue or the trigger is usually an uncomfortable emotion or an undesired or an unsafe emotion. And this is key to everything, okay? So when your bad habit is emotional, which most probably it is, the cue, the trigger, is almost always actually not external, it's internal. It's an uncomfortable emotion. It's something that you're feeling that you don't want to feel. That's the trigger. That's the actual trigger. You might think that the trigger is like social situations or a break from work or having to do some homework or some project at home. But that's not the actual trigger. The actual trigger is something that situation is making you feel. So for example, in a social situation, it might be shame or anxiety, or in a work break, it might be stress, or in a project or homework, it might be overwhelm. And those are actually the triggers. Those emotions are the triggers because they feel uncomfortable to you or unsafe to you, and you don't want to feel them. So you need to find a way to not feel them, to avoid them, to stop feeling them. And that's where the behavior or the routine, the pattern then comes in. It's the thing that you do. And the difference here is that behavior is not just an automatic habit, like a pattern that you do automatically. It's not just like you doing things unconsciously for nothing. It's actually an attempt of self-regulating. It's actually an attempt of self-soothing. You're trying to soothe yourself. You're trying to regulate your emotions and to help yourself avoid feeling whatever you were feeling that you don't want to feel. So that's the key difference here. The trigger is an emotion inside of you that feels uncomfortable and unsafe. And the behavior is an attempt to self-regulate and self-soothe and avoid that feeling. Doesn't mean it works, but it's an attempt. And then finally, the reward part or the reinforcement part is that you seemingly successfully avoid that feeling. And I say seemingly because you will see that eventually it actually doesn't work that way. But in the moment, while you are avoiding it, maybe smoking or doom scrolling or eating, it feels like, oh, I'm avoiding that. I'm not feeling that anymore. I'm being able to avoid that feeling. When I do this behavior, I'm distracted from that feeling. And maybe it even makes you feel good. Like maybe eating sugar makes you feel good, right? Or doom scrolling, it gives you that dopamine hit. So it's not only helping you avoid that feeling, but also providing some feeling of instant pleasure, instant gratification that reinforces the behavior. And so next time that you feel that emotion again, you'll do the same thing to help yourself avoid it. So yeah, that's how it works. So now that we know how it works, how can we transform that? What can we do? And now it's easier because the first step, what's super important, is to understand what is the function of that pattern in your life. What it is trying to help you do that. That's crucial. This thing that you call bad habit, what is its function in your life? What is it trying to help you do? Because as I always say, every single one of your emotions, every part of you has always, every time, a positive intent, a function, a way that it's trying to help you every time. There isn't a single part of you, a single emotion that you ever have that is not trying to help you. Okay, that is not trying to help you somehow to have a function in your life that doesn't have a positive intent. So it's very important to start from this perspective, to start from this mindset and ask, what is it for that part of you? So think about your bad habit and ask yourself, how is this part of me, how is this pattern trying to help me? What function is it trying to have in my life? Another way of asking this, and I love this way of asking it, I usually like to say it like this. What's right with what's wrong with you? So ask that to yourself. What is right with what's wrong with you? Okay? So take some moment, go inside and see, okay, this pattern, this bad habit that I have, that I think there's something wrong with me, what's right with that? What's good about it? What is it helping me with? And then see what you come up with. So if you dig deep enough, you will always find that the job of that bad habit, of that part of you, is to help you avoid an emotion that is uncomfortable, undesirable, unsafe for you to feel. A feeling that you don't want to feel, that it feels very scary to feel. So that means that one way to stop that bad habit could be to find a better strategy not to feel that feeling, right? A better strategy to return to emotional regulation. A strategy that is actually healthy and actually works, and not a strategy that harms you, like the one that you're currently using. And that's very powerful, I would say. That's a very powerful way of doing it. And if you think of it this way, it can actually change your life. Okay? So this is what we would call a healthy coping mechanism. a healthy coping mechanism. And this is not the final solution, and you'll understand why soon, but this is a very powerful first step. This is when you understand, okay, for example, let's talk about smoking. Smoking is helping me avoid stress, but smoking is hurting me, my health. What if I could find a better strategy to help me avoid that stress or cope with that stress that doesn't hurt me and maybe even actually is good for me? So this is key, because you're not trying to force yourself to quit that bad habit, which is your only coping mechanism that you have. And that would generate a lot of resistance, because then you would be with no coping mechanism for stress or shame or whatever it is. No, you're doing the opposite. You're saying, oh, there's a function that this bad habit is trying to achieve. So what if I find a better way to fulfill that function? Then that bad habit will no longer be needed. And that actually happens. So for example, you learn how to meditate. You learn how to release stress in your body through somatic awareness, somatic practices, dancing, breath work, meditation, whatever it is. You learn a way that's actually helping you release that stress and deal with it. And it's actually in a healthy way. And it works better than smoking, right? Because smoking doesn't really work that well to relieve stress. It just feels like that in the moment. But those actually work. So you start doing them, and eventually, naturally, emotionally, you no longer need to use smoking or whatever strategy you were using to cope, because it's no longer needed, because you have found a better way to manage your stress, to release it, one that's actually healthy and useful and works. And so the only reason why you were smoking, or the strongest reason, was to help you do that. So you no longer have that reason, so you no longer have any use for smoking. And then you will see that it will be much easier to drop smoking or whatever pattern, whatever bad habit you had. Then the emotional component will be taken care of, will no longer be there. So it will be just a habit. It will be just a habit part. And that's when you can do all of those things of awareness, changing it, replacing it, being conscious of it, and making an if-then planning, all of that, tracking it. And that's when it will actually work. Or that's actually when you can actually use things like willpower or cold turkey quitting. Then you can use them, because the emotional part of it will not be holding you back anymore, will not creating that resistance anymore. So those can actually work. But you always have to address the emotional component first. So this is very powerful. It's the understanding. So there are two steps here. The first one is understanding what is the function that your bad habit is trying to have in your life. And usually that is, what emotion is it trying to help you deal with? And then finding a better strategy to actually deal with that emotion, and one that is healthy. This is a really cool thing about doing things this way, understanding the emotional component, which is that you don't even have to worry about stopping the bad habit or fighting against it. You don't need to do that. It's much easier and smoother. You just focus on doing the new thing, on practicing the new healthy coping mechanism. And then as you do that, and as it works naturally, you will be able to let go of the other one, because you'll no longer need it. So that's the second step. You just start doing the new coping mechanism, and eventually the third step would be like to become aware that you no longer need the previous one and dropping it. And this seems easy then said like this, but the thing is, it actually is. When you do it this way, things actually become much easier, and it's just because you are addressing the emotional component. When you do that, things become easier and they work. And when you don't do that, that's when they actually feel very hard. And that's probably been your experience, because you are fighting your emotions. So this is very powerful. And when people do this, their life completely changes. And what you need to do here is really to learn how to have very powerful, healthy, self-regulating tools and mechanisms in your life. Learn those. But this is, of course, not something that I'm going to be teaching in this particular video, but there are many others where I teach those. And if you are not part yet of our Starsel School community, where we have many resources and trainings and courses on also these self-regulating tools, then come join us, check us out at starselschool.com, and we have all of that for you there. So this is super powerful. When people learn the healthy self-regulation tools, they can let go of the bad habits, and that's life-changing, and I love that. So I don't want to diminish that, but there's still a problem with that method, okay? And the problem is that even though it's beautiful and lets you completely stop the bad habit, you are still avoiding an emotion. You are still doing that to avoid an emotion, to avoid a part of you, an uncomfortable feeling. And because you are still doing that, that prevents like genuine growth and connection and authenticity in your life. It prevents thriving. So I don't think you want to just cope in life, right? That's a healthy coping mechanism, but do you want to just cope in life, or do you want to thrive? I would say you want to thrive, because we humans, we all want to thrive. So even if this works, it still keeps you limited. It still keeps you avoiding emotions in life, coping with emotions rather than actually becoming fully healed and whole and authentic and thriving. So that's why we need a better, even better method. And that's only problem number one, because problem number two is that there's an interesting pattern in life that seems almost like an universal law. And I've heard it being called things like the golden algorithm or even other names, but it almost feels like a law of how things work. And the way it works is the following. When we try to avoid an emotion, the way that we try to avoid that emotion is actually how we end up creating more of that emotion in our lives. So the mechanism, the process through which we try to avoid an emotion actually eventually ends up creating more of that emotion in our lives. And that seems to be true every time. And this has many explanations that will be for another episode, but this is especially visible in what I call the shame cycle. The shame cycle especially of the unhealthy coping mechanisms. Because think about your unhealthy coping mechanisms or your bad habits. As you were saying, they are usually triggered to help you avoid a bad feeling, usually a feeling of shame. It can be any other feeling, stress, overwhelm, but often it is also shame. So let's talk about the shame example. And the pattern, that bad habit, comes up to try to help you avoid that feeling of negative feeling, like shame in this case. And it seems to work. It seems to provide you some relief or some distraction from that feeling of shame. But then, even though it seems to work like momentarily, then we actually feel bad about ourselves and we judge ourselves for doing that pattern again, that we know is bad for us, and that triggers more shame. And that in turn triggers the pattern more, which triggers more shame, and so on. The cycle goes like that. And that's why it can be so easy to get stuck in patterns like doom scrolling, binge watching, gaming, binge eating, etc. Because they lead to this same cycle, because they simultaneously provide relief from the feeling, but they also trigger more of the feeling that they're trying to avoid. And that's why you keep stuck there. So think about doom scrolling. You go there not to feel some negative emotion, right? Not to feel bad about yourself. And you're scrolling and it helps you avoid it. But then you're thinking to yourself, I shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. I'm wasting time. So you feel shame again and guilt, and you feel more bad about yourself. So you need to scroll more to avoid more of that feeling. And that makes you feel even worse about yourself. So you keep scrolling forever. And that's how doom scrolling happen. It's because you're in that cycle. And the way that you're trying to avoid that feeling is also the way that you're creating more of it. And this is true for any emotion that you're trying to avoid. For example, you smoke to avoid stress, and maybe that helps momentarily, but you also feel more stressed because you know that smoking is bad for your health and you shouldn't be doing that. And with time, the smoking will actually make your body more stressed. It will increase your inflammation signals in your body. It will make your body more stressed, and you're doing it to avoid stress, right? So that's another example. And these are the bad habits. So you can ask, Philip, okay, but what about the healthy coping mechanisms? If I replace them, does it work that way as well? And it's much better, as I was saying, it's much better. But even for the healthy coping mechanisms, even if you're not any longer directly harming yourself, even if the coping mechanism is healthy for you, if you dig deep enough, you are, as I was saying, you are still avoiding a part of you, are still rejecting an emotion that you have, and that never feels good. That never feels good. That's a block. You're blocking something inside of you, and that will show up sooner or later. You will be limiting yourself in what you can do in life. You will be placing a boundary, a limit on where you can exist and where you cannot exist, and you'll be self-limiting yourself. And besides, that avoidance, that healthy coping mechanism, the avoidance that it provides, the soothing that it provides is only temporary, because that emotion that you're running away from will still be there waiting for you. So you will become dependent on that coping strategy for your life. Maybe you'll even need to escalate it, make it more and more and more dependent on it. And again, you will be self-limited in what you can do and who you can be in your life experience. Because you'll not be able to do and be everything you are, because that would mean triggering that emotion that you're trying to avoid. So you are limited. And this is why, even though it's already very powerful and life-changing, we need to go deeper here. And before we go there, all of this that I'm saying, something interesting just to observe is that it often leads to another vicious cycle, which is regarding awareness. So even though we said that awareness is the key to change a bad habit, what happens is, because when people become aware of their bad habits, they start judging themselves and feeling more shame, and they enter into the shame cycle, and that triggers more of it, and they go into this spiral, this downward spiral. What happens is that people will often train themselves to become less aware of their bad habits, of their patterns, because they learn that it's painful to be aware of them, right? Because then if they are aware of them, they will just feel more shame and judgment and go down that downward spiral. So people will actually train themselves to become less aware of their bad habits, and that's how they become even more of habits. They become even more automatic, less conscious. So they do that to avoid the higher pain, and maybe sometimes doing that might save you from going that downward spiral, escalating that pattern more and more of shame, right? But doing that also ensures you get really stuck in that harmful bad habit, in that harmful pattern. So this is important to understand, that the key here is not just awareness alone, because sometimes just awareness can lead you into that shame cycle. The key is to combine awareness with that loving and compassionate view of that part of you, the one that we started with, the one that sees the positive intent in it, the one that sees how it's trying to help you, how it cares about, the one that sees the beauty, the good, and the intention to help in that part of you. The view that asks what's right with what's wrong with you. It's so critical to start from this mindset. It's so critical to start from this state, not just awareness of it, but this awareness with this safety, with this is part of what I call in my Emotional Mastery Academy and in other videos that I talk about. It's part of what I call inner safety, which is this self-loving, self-compassionate presence. That's part of it. And so it's so important to pair that awareness with this self-love, self-compassion, this inner safety that makes you ask what's right with that part of me and not what's wrong with that part of me. This is why it's so important. And this is why we started from there today. And so this is why it is so important to start from this perspective, because it helps diffuse the shame cycle while still maintaining awareness or even increasing awareness. So this is a key. Even the way that you name it a bad habit, ask yourself what makes you name it bad, okay? Because yes, it's true, the habit is harming you somehow, and there's also a positive intent to it. So I want you to have that specific question in your mind. I want you to be coming to that with that question in your mind. How is this habit good for me? How is it trying to help me? And just that will diffuse the shame and will help you go into the underlying emotion. And that's why we start from there. So I have an experiment for you, which is the following. Next time that you go into that habit, I invite you to, instead of going into instant judgment, shame, and going down that spiral, do the opposite. Next time that you go into that habit, I want you to actually lean fully into it. Okay? So allow yourself to really, when you're doing that habit, if it's smoking, if you're smoking to feel less stressed, then allow yourself to really smoke and allow yourself to really feel less stressed in the process. Allow yourself to relax as much as possible. Set your intention to relax and then really pay close attention to the experience of smoking and see how it's helping you relax or not. So see what happens as you do that. If you are doom scrolling to avoid overwhelm, or if you are binge watching to avoid loneliness, then do the same thing. Really lean into that process. Don't go against it. Don't go away from it. Go into it and go with that perspective. Oh, how is this good for me? Let me really see how this is trying to help me, and let me really go there. Let yourself really welcome and embrace that fully, that pattern fully, the intention behind it fully, and give it all that it needs to fulfill its function. Okay. So again, if you're smoking to relieve stress, really do your best to, okay, I'm just going to relax now. If I'm smoking to relax, let me fully relax while I'm smoking. Let me see how this helps. If I'm doom scrolling to avoid overwhelm, let me really just see how this helps. Let me see how much doom scrolling helps me avoid overwhelm. If it's trying to do that, okay, let's do that. Let's avoid overwhelm. And just allow it like that. Don't judge it. Allow it like that and see what you find out. See what happens as you do it. So do this experiment and see what you find out. And usually you will find two things. The first, you will find that the pattern is actually not helping you fulfill its goal. It's often the contrary. It's making that emotion even more present. And because you're doing that without judgment, you're not triggering it more. It's actually going to help you drop more of it. Just this awareness of that leads you to naturally drop that. Just this awareness leads you to naturally going to stop doing that habit, because you were validating, you were saying, okay, let's do this. Yes, my bad habit, part of me that you want to help me stop feeling stressed or stop feeling shame. Okay, do that. Let me see how it's helping. And then you're just not judging, you're just being with it and trying to help it do that, but it's not working. So you're like, okay, I need to find a better one. So it's much easier for you to drop that pattern. However, you are still lacking a better strategy. So you have this open door to dropping the pattern, but you'll still need a better strategy. Okay. And the better strategy could be a healthy coping mechanism, but that will still be avoidance. So I will be talking about what would be even better for you. Okay. So you usually find that one thing, and then you find out another thing, which is that the second thing, which is that just being with that part of you, just being with that habit, and just being with that loving kindness and that compassion, that understanding and validation, just that alone usually softens that habit, usually soothes you. And it is often enough to break the vicious cycle, the shame vicious cycle. So just this being with it and validating it and loving it, and like validating your underlying need for self-soothing, for less stress, for not feeling shame, for not feeling overwhelmed. Just being with that and validating it and loving it is often very powerful in ending the pattern. Okay? Just that. So that's the other thing you find out. Although still it's not enough alone, because there would be still the unsafe emotion behind it that was triggered. And that's what leads us to the next step. That's what leads us to the final solution that I want to give you today for really being able to quit any bad habit for good. Okay, this is how it really happens. And the truth is, there is only one way to truly quit a bad habit for good. And that way is to no longer need the bad habit or any habit for that. And let me make it clear. The way that we were talking about before, where you replace the bad habit with a better coping mechanism, you no longer need the bad habit, but not because you no longer have the problem, but because you found a better solution, a better way of coping with it. But where I'm going here, it's going even deeper. It's making it so you no longer need a bad habit, not because you found a better habit, but because the problem that it's trying to solve doesn't even exist anymore. So this is what I mean by working at the root, going to the root and healing at the root cause. It's not by finding better coping mechanisms, it's actually going to the root cause and working there. And that's making it that the problem doesn't even exist anymore. And so you don't even need to have a bad habit or a healthy coping mechanism. So what does it mean here? What is the root cause? We already know that. The only reason why you need that pattern is that there's an emotion that you're trying not to feel. Because that emotion feels unpleasant, and you learned in your life experiences, as a child probably, you learned that it's wrong and unsafe to have that emotion, to feel that feeling. And so that's the only reason why you need to do that coping. It's because you think and you feel inside of you that you have to not feel that feeling. You're afraid of it. And the problem is, if you want to get rid of that problem, you could try eliminating that emotion, but you probably know that that's impossible. It's impossible to get rid of your emotions. No matter how much you try, it's not ever going possible. And even if you have some form of success, the problem is that's actually going to be more harmful for you than good. So the solution, and the only solution, it's not possible to eliminate the feeling, so the only solution is to make that feeling feel safe again to feel. To make it feel safe again to feel that feeling. To make it not a threat anymore. Because then you will no longer need to defend yourself from it, and you'll naturally drop that pattern. And this is the final solution, is to make that feeling safe again. Shame. Make it safe to feel shame again. I know that's crazy, but it's actually very possible. And we teach you how to do that. And I'm going to have an experiment for you. But stress, make it safe for you to feel stress. Make it safe for you to be with your stress. And this is why the previous experiment that we were doing is already so powerful. Because when you're just sitting with that part of you, when you're just sitting with it, you are already in some way allowing yourself to be with that scary emotion, with love and compassion. You're allowing yourself to be present with it. And that's exactly what you need to do. What if, instead of needing to run away from that feeling, to avoid that feeling, to cope with that feeling, even with a healthy coping mechanism, what if instead of that, it was actually safe for you to feel that feeling? It was okay to feel that feeling, and you didn't even need to run away from it. You didn't need to avoid it, to cope with it. Instantly, you would no longer need any more bad habits, any more patterns, because they would have no more function. And so I have this experiment for you, okay? So close your eyes right now if you want, take a deep breath, and go into maybe the last moment where you did that bad habit, where you went into it. And just be there. Don't go into any shame, don't go into any judgment. Just be present with that feeling, just be present with that moment. See yourself, see that habit as you, a part of you trying its best to help you cope with a difficult feeling. And just be that habit. And observe the situation as it's happening. And now as you're observing it, I want you to imagine, what if you were not allowed to have that bad habit in that moment? What if you're not allowed to do anything other than to feel whatever it would be there? If you were not allowed to have that bad habit, what would you have to feel in that moment? Ask yourself that and let it come up. And then as that feeling comes up, your only goal is to allow yourself to fully feel that emotion with love and safety. Do not try to resist that feeling. Do not try to push it away. Do not try to kill it or eliminate it. Do not see it as wrong or something to avoid. Instead, this is just an experiment. Experiment for a minute or two to fully allow that feeling. If it's shame, fully allow the shame and love it. If it's stress, fully allow the stress and love it. If it's overwhelm, if it's loneliness, fully allow them. Just for a minute or two, experiment what it feels like to fully allow those feelings. Love them. And see how the pattern naturally changes and maybe even fades. Continue allowing yourself to fully feel that emotion that you will have to feel if you were not allowed to have your bad habit. Stay with it. And if for any reason you are feeling it very difficult to feel and love that feeling, if you're feeling a strong resistance, then instead of forcing it, what you can do is you can, for now, allow the feeling of resistance itself. Love the resistance. If you cannot love the feeling yet, love the resistance to it. Love the avoidance. Allow that feeling. If you cannot love the feeling itself, then be with the resistance to it. Be with the feeling of not wanting it and allow that for now. And just do that. It's gonna work just the same. So stay with it. Allow that emotion, love it, or allow the resistance to it and love it. And just be like that for another minute or two. You can pause the video and take all the time that you need to finish this exercise. Yeah, beautiful. And so I suggest you do this every day. Take 10 minutes every day. If you're really trying to quit a bad habit for good, I would say this is the most powerful thing you can do. Take 10 minutes every day to do just this exercise and then see how that pattern naturally changes and fades in your life. Like that, without you having to force anything, without you having to fight it, without you having to discipline yourself, use willpower, any other uncomfortable method. Just by allowing the difficult emotion, see how the bad habit naturally drops because it's no longer needed. So that's it for today. I hope this helps you. And if you're interested in learning more about how and why your emotions become sometimes threats to you and why you resist them and how that happens, and to really learn the most powerful tools to bring them back to safety and heal yourself in that process, and in that way drop all the bad habits in your life, then check out our courses and community and resources at starsoulschool.com. We are here to help you, and see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk the Walk. If you enjoyed it, like us and send it to someone who you think will like it too. We love your feedback and interaction, and you're welcome to leave us a comment or review, ask a question, or just reach out. Lastly, if today's conversation stirred something in you, remember, you don't have to walk this path alone. Our Star Soul School community is where these conversations continue, where you can connect with others on similar journeys and access the courses and support designed to help you integrate this work into your daily life. You will find everything at starsoulschool.com, and the link is in the show notes. See you next time.